Hi, folks, welcome back. I hope you're all doing well. So, while there have been many studies that talk about the productivity benefits of using AI, such as GitHub Copilot, there hasn't been a ton of work that talks about how exactly that productivity is achieved. What are the underlying mechanisms, how it changes the granular nature of how that work is done. And this paper that we're looking at today is one such study. The really interesting thing about this paper is the way the experiment is set up. It is a natural experiment that ran over a long period of time. What do we mean by that? So they look at a 2-year period that straddles the launch of GitHub Copilot. So they naturally have a cut point where some behavior was observed before the launch of Copilot and some after. Within that, they have a further stratification of, even after the launch of Copilot, a set of developers that used it versus another set that did not use it. And then a third axis is the ability of developers. Within the set of developers that used Copilot, the authors here are using some proxy measures to stratify them into high ability developers versus lower ability developers and looking at how their usage and work patterns changed as a result of using Copilot. So this is not a controlled experiment, but it is observing developers doing their usual day-to-day work. And the population size is pretty high. It's of the order of hundreds of thousands of developers. The other interesting thing about this study is that it utilizes internal proprietary data available only to GitHub. A lot of developer activity is, of course, publicly available on GitHub, like how many commits, how many PRs, and so on a developer has made. But they join that with internal proprietary data about which developers were using Copilot, which of them were given free access to Copilot, and so on. All right, one more thing about the experiment setup before we get to the result. They classify all work into two large buckets, coding and project management. Coding includes all the usual work you would expect, things like pushing commits, forking, submitting pull requests, and then everything else is non-coding. But within that category, they zoom in on project management activities, which have to do with the upkeep, maintenance, and community-oriented aspects of writing code. Things like looking at the repos bugs, or looking at the various boards associated with the project, or reviewing pull requests, and all these more collaborative activities as opposed to a single person just writing and pushing code. All right, so that's how the experiment was set up. What did they find? The first big headline finding is that using Copilot made developers shift more towards core coding work. So they saw that compared to the baseline, there was a 12% shift towards coding work for the developers that used Copilot. And correspondingly, there was a big drop in project management work. A corollary of that major finding is that using Copilot tended to push people towards more autonomous work. And the reason that happens is that people tend to use Copilot to solve issues for which they would have had to reach out for help in the past. So a lot of human interaction for helping solve problems is getting substituted by Copilot helping them out. The next big finding has to do with whether developers stay in areas they are comfortable with or whether they explore new things. They call this the exploit versus explore trade-off. And what they found was that developers who use Copilot are more likely to branch out and explore other repositories, other work, rather than stay within their few familiar repositories. As I say over here, Copilot developers engaged with an additional 15 new repositories on average. And the last big finding is, what is the difference in these shifts between higher and lower ability developers? And what they found was that lower ability developers, those below the median, had larger increases in coding activities and correspondingly larger reductions in project management activities than their higher ability peers. And this mirrors many other findings of the use of AI in other domains, where researchers have also seen similar patterns where lower ability workers benefit much more from AI. All right, so that was a quick look at a paper that looks at how the adoption of Copilot actually affects the granular nature of the way developers carry out their work. And the authors here had the opportunity to set up a really interesting natural experiment spanning over 2 years, spanning hundreds of thousands of developers. And they found some pretty interesting patterns. Developers that use Copilot tend to do more coding work, less project management work. They tend to be more explorative and more autonomous. And all of these effects are more pronounced for lower ability developers than higher ability developers. I hope you enjoyed that. If you like videos like this, please consider subscribing, like the video, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much.